Hi, guys. Hi, hello. Happy Monday. May the 4th be with you. What we've got going on today is the beginning of a brand new unit. This is actually going to be our final unit of World Studies, the second semester of World Studies. So we're going to kind of just dive in over the course of the next 3 weeks. We're going to be getting to know the history of China and East Asia in general, I suppose. We're going to kind of ease into the unit. There's not going to be any official assignment stuff until about middle of this week, but we are going to start with some notes. So you guys should have out your notebooks. You should label in there that this is the beginning of Unit 4, China. And we're going to just kind of get into it. We're going to start exactly how we always do, talking about the geography of China or East Asia as it is in the beginning here. So one of the first big things that has characterized every place that we've talked about in this second semester of World Studies is the fact that in all of the major areas where civilizations develop, there's a river valley. So there are two, actually, in China, both of which are in very important to the start of the Chinese civilizations. We've got the Huanghu, or the Yellow River Valley, and then there's the Chengqiang, or the Yangtze River Valley. The Yangtze is almost perfectly in the middle of the, again, East Asian territory, splitting the north from the south. Of course, we know the impacts of river valleys kind of straightforward. Obviously, I've got my item here. That these two river valleys are the largest food producing areas in the entirety of the ancient world. It's up to you to come up with the why is it important, the so what. That's why that's underlined right there. What kind of impact does that have on this part of the world, on these people, as they start to figure out who they are and what's kind of happening with them, okay? The interesting thing about East Asia is that not all of the land is suitable for farming. Again, only 10% in total is suitable for farming. The United States we're about 19% of our land is, just to put it in perspective. So again, thinking about what does that mean for the people of China? If you can't farm, what else can't you do, or how is it that you adapt to that kind of situation? So it's important to sort of take that into consideration here, right? As far as other major, again, excuse me, landforms go, you're not going to have to know them by name. There's a handful of different mountain ranges that are going to be in East Asia, as well as deserts. Of course, we know for a fact what these two things do. We've got ourselves mountains and deserts, natural barriers. They're going to keep the people of China relatively isolated. Again, and it's up to you, and it's your responsibility to come up with the so what? What does that mean for the people of China? What does that mean for the whole area of East Asia when this comes right down to it? The next item or element, the last element to understand about East Asia, which makes them very, it's just interesting in my opinion, is the fact that there are 7 different climate zones within East Asia itself. There is areas of tropical, there are areas of steppe, which is thinking plateau, there's deserts, there's subtropical, there's continental, there's highland. Pretty much every kind of climate that you have heard of or seen before is somewhere in East Asia. It all depends kind of on where they are elevation wise, if they're in the mountains, if they're down in one of the valleys, and then the monsoon patterns. Of course, we know that monsoons are the wind patterns from our last unit that dump water and rain into certain parts of the country. They do have dry and wet seasons because of the monsoons, and there are severe temperature differences across the board. And in your understanding of this, you have to go with the So what does that mean for the people living in East Asia overall? And how does that impact them? That's what you have to kind of keep in mind here, right? Again, I'm not going to tell you straightforward because that by this point you guys are experts on this. You have to think critically. How do these different elements of the geography of East Asia impact the people of China as they start to develop and to figure out who they are? So this unit is different to the other units we've had in a particular way, in the fact that the history of China is dictated by dynasties. So we're going to talk about a bunch of dynasties. So you're going to see this, and it's going to feel kind of repetitive as we go, but it's a good way to kind of keep things in line. So technically, the first dynasty, the first family that rules over the territory of East Asia, they were Shia. Again, the Shia, we just don't know much about them. So we kind of skip them in the grand scheme of things. And we're going to start with the Shang. The Shang dynasty ruled from 1750 to 1045 BCE. So before the Common Era, we're counting down. In the Shang dynasty, we're going to kind of talk about this process of social, political, religion, culture. It all kind of bleeds together overall. But the way that the Shang dynasty looked, so as the people of China deal with the geography and start to develop their own way of life, the Shang dynasty is the next family that is going to rule over China after the Xia. It's a farming-based society, again, thinking that they are going to live close to the river valleys, ruled by an aristocracy. And aristocracy is like a fancy way of saying wealthy landowners. The aristocracy, they own the most land, and it's passing through families. So thinking again, the passing or inheriting of land and wealth. There is a king in the Shang dynasty. Obviously, a dynasty is a monarchy at its core. The king rules in kind of a more disconnected way. There's not just a kingdom and he makes all the decisions. He chooses warlords, princes, nobles to rule over smaller territories within his large kingdom or territory of control. Religion and culture kind of overlapping with social and society here. An interesting thing about the Shang dynasty that has been found through the evidence, through artifacts uncovered over time, is the fact that there's an interesting social dynamic between noble women at this time. So women in the highest class of the Shang dynasty had a similar status to men. They could own land, they could lead armies, but that just is the noble women. The rest of the social classes and the way that people interact with each other is pretty typical. There's royalty at the top, then a warrior class, artisans and merchants, and then peasants at the bottom who do a lot of work for everybody. When it comes to religion and culture of the Shang dynasty, this is going to be, I mean, you have to think about how ancient this is. So their religion is very much based in the world around them, in the fact that they don't understand how things work. It's more typical as far as the, I guess, approach to religion goes, trying to explain the unexplainable. There's evidence that the Shang dynasty believed in oracles, the idea of predicting the future, or trying to answer questions that don't have answers. Oracle bones are kind of a cool religious ritual where you carve a question into a bone and then you stab it with metal that's been heated up and it shatters the bone, and you're supposed to be able to read how the pieces break up. There's also evidence that in this dynasty there was human sacrifice. They do believe in life after death, that ancestors move on but are still around. So it's pretty similar to some of the other religions, ancient religions that we've talked about. Ancestors that stick around, they can bring good and bad fortune onto a house depending on the behavior of those alive. This is a fundamental religious belief that does kind of bleed into a lot of the later beliefs of the Chinese. Because the Shang is so old, besides kind of their basic, I guess, unique approaches to religion and to society. The other big accomplishment that you're going to have to sort of just be able to call up is the fact that the Shang dynasty, what they were best known for outside of their agriculture was bronze casting, working with bronze. So this is the Bronze Age or the River Valley Age of civilization. So taking bronze and manipulating it into different types of goods, jewelries, weapons, other tools. That's what they were known for, is being able to work bronze and to make it into things that were useful or decorative. The last thing we're going to talk about is very important to this whole process of understanding the dynasties of China, and that is the dynastic cycle. The dynastic cycle is straightforward, the rise and fall of dynasties. Very straightforward definition for you. And the reason it's so important, of course, is that it helps us understand why there are so many dynasties throughout the history of China. And the other element of the dynastic cycle is this idea of mandate of heaven. We'll talk more about that tomorrow with the Zhou dynasty. The mandate of heaven is this ultimately the divine right to rule. When a dynasty comes into power in China, they proclaim this. They say that their dynasty, their family, has been given the responsibility from heaven, so thinking the beyond, from the ancestors, from the outside of, in that belief, it means that they should take over. This image down here, I would encourage you to take it right into your notebook, so you can pause me, so you can draw this in there. But this is what we're going to see time and time and time again. We're starting in the bottom left. The new dynasty claims the mandate of heaven. Going into it at the beginning of this cycle, the new dynasty is going to restore peace. They're going to appoint new officials. They'll redistribute land to people. They'll try and improve the territory by building canals and irrigation systems, roads. They'll repair defensive walls. Again, they're just trying to fix a lot of the stuff that had gone bad. After several generations, the new dynasty will move on to the age of maturity. So after multiple leaders have passed on control from son to son to son to son to son down the road, it becomes an aging dynasty. In an aging dynasty, this is where they start to fall apart. We've seen this in other civilizations, not quite in the same exact cycle as this, but similar, where governments start to fall apart. There's more corruption. They're losing control. They usually have to ask for a lot of taxes because they've grown very comfortable in the kind of luxury that they have. They allow for defenses to fall apart. The aging dynasty at that point loses the mandate of heaven, and again, things really fall apart. And there'll be these moments in time throughout Chinese history where dynasties have gaps, and the problems are intense. There's floods, there's famine, earthquakes, invasions will happen. There'll be bandits, revolts. In that moment, it's like a sign from the heavens that that dynasty is done, that they have lost favor with the gods and things like that, and it's time for someone new to come in. And that's exactly what happens. A new dynasty claims, and the cycle begins again. And this is going to happen over and over and over throughout Chinese history. So again, pause if you need to, if you're still drawing that. Otherwise, we're done with notes for the day. As far as work to be completed, like I said, we're going to kind of ease into it. Keep checking classroom. There'll be lectures each day. Again, assignments, things like that. The only assignment that'll be out there for now, at least for a while, until Wednesday, is going to be your study aid, which you should see posted already. Get its due Friday the 22nd. So like I said, we've got 3 weeks for China to get to know it. Remember, you can only use the options on Classroom. No other options are allowed. Make sure that you work on it a little bit every day or every couple of days so you don't have to cram it all in the last second. please remember with your study aids, this is important. Again, your test is going to be online. It's going to be open note just like the last time. So you got to make sure you put good work into this. The ability to use your study aid and use it effectively will be a huge help for those of you who might not have done as well on this test as you could have. So make sure that you've got importance and you've got details. I will be checking halfway through, giving some points. That's going to happen on Wednesday the 13th. So again, nothing like official yet, but keep that in mind. We've already covered a few of the key terms that you could get done if you're looking for it and you've got some time today. Other than that, I hope you guys have a good day. And yeah, again, I'll see you tomorrow.